Welcome to the club.
Let's dive into one of the biggest books ever written, Tolstoy's War and Peace, to tackle a question that's just as big. When the world is completely turning upside down, when empires are clashing, how on earth does a regular person figure out what their life is all about? So, picture this. The year is 1807. The bloody wars that have just torn Europe apart are finally hitting the pause button, and right there, on a raft floating in the middle of a river, you have two of the most powerful men on the planet, Napoleon of France and Emperor Alexander of Russia. They're about to make peace. But what does all this pomp and circumstance actually look like to the guy who's been fighting on the ground? Okay, so let's go there. We're going to see this historic meeting, not from the high and mighty perspective of the emperors, but through the eyes of one young Russian soldier who has seen up close the real cost of their grand ambitions. And that soldier is Nikolai Rostov. He's watching his own emperor, Alexander, who looks just as noble and grand as you'd expect. But then he looks over at Napoleon. And to Rostov, who's an expert horseman, the great conqueror of Europe, he just looks kind of small, awkward even. His smile looks totally fake, and he's not even sitting right on his horse. It's this tiny detail, but for Rostov, it plants this huge seed of doubt in his mind. All the celebration, the fancy ceremonies, the toasts between these two guys who were just trying to kill each other, it all just feels so hollow to Rostov. His mind immediately flashes back to the military hospital, to the smell of death, the disease, the piles of amputated limbs, and now he's watching his emperor shaking hands with the man responsible for all of it, and this question just burns in his brain. What was any of it for? Rostov isn't the only one feeling totally lost, though. Tolstoy introduces us to two other men, both from the Russian high society, and each one is trapped in his own personal crisis, just completely adrift in a world that doesn't make any sense anymore. First up, you've got Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. He was wounded in a major battle, his wife died, and he's basically retreated from the world, absolutely convinced his life is over. And on a trip through the countryside, he spots this old, gnarled oak tree, and it's like he's looking in a mirror. He sees his own soul, bitter, lifeless, and just refusing to believe that spring could ever come again. And then there's Pierre Bezukhov. He's this incredibly wealthy, good-hearted guy, but he's just lost. He'd put all his hope into the Freemasons, believing the secret society had the answers to life. But what he finds is that it's really just another social club, full of guys climbing the ladder and mumbling rituals they don't even understand. It gives him nothing real. So there are our three guys. Rostov, completely disillusioned by the hypocrisy of war. Andrei, just drowning in his own grief and cynicism. And Pierre, who's been let down by his search for some kind of spiritual truth. All three of them are well and truly stuck, and they're desperate for something, anything, to believe in. But here's where it gets interesting. Tolstoy shows us that even when you're at rock bottom, life has a funny way of showing up. For each of these men, a single moment comes along, something completely unexpected, that shatters their despair and points them in a totally new direction. For our cynic, Prince Andrei, the change comes from just about the last place you'd expect. He's staying at the Rostovs' country estate, and he's woken up in the middle of the night by a young woman's voice. It's the young Natasha Rostova, and she's leaning out her window, just completely overcome with pure, simple joy at how beautiful the night is. And that feeling, that unfiltered love of life, it just cuts right through all of his cynicism. And then, on his trip home, he passes that exact same oak tree. But look at this. The angry, barren monster he saw in the spring, it's gone. In its place is a tree just exploding with new green leaves. It's been reborn. Seeing that, with Natasha's joyful voice still in his head, something inside him just cracks wide open. The tree's transformation becomes this incredible symbol for his own second chance. And right then and there, he makes a decision. His life is not over. He realizes he can't just sit around and wait for the end. He has to get back in the world, he has to do something, he has to live. Pierre's big aha moment is a little more intellectual. He goes to his Masonic mentor, who basically tells him, "You're doing it all wrong." As you see here, the mentor lays out the three goals of their society. Pierre, in his big-hearted idealism, jumped straight to step 3, trying to fix the whole world, without ever doing the really hard internal work of step 2, fixing himself first. So what about Rostov, our soldier who's wrestling with all this doubt? Well, he finds his answer not by digging for some deeper truth, but by deciding to stop asking questions altogether. To get rid of that awful contradiction between the horror he's seen and the honor he's supposed to feel, he makes a choice. He just embraces a simple soldier's code, blind obedience. Don't think, just do your duty. That's it.
So, problem solved, right? They've all found their new direction. Well, not so fast. Finding a new path is one thing. Actually walking it is a whole different story. These moments of clarity, they aren't happy endings. Nope, they are the start of brand new, even more complicated struggles.
Andrei, full of this new purpose, heads straight for St. Petersburg. He decides he's going to use his sharp mind for the good of Russia, and he joins a committee to reform the government. He's working under a man everyone thinks is a rising star, a genius named Speransky. And yeah, Andrei admires the guy's incredible intellect, but he's also really unsettled by him. I mean, look at this list. Andrei notices his cold eyes that you can't see into. He sees his soft white hands, hands that have never done a day of real work. And he just senses this chillingly logical view of the world. He starts to suspect that Speransky actually holds all of humanity in contempt, and it really gives him pause. Pierre, on the other hand, takes his mentor's advice to heart. He actually reconciles with his wife, who he can't stand, and he begins the really hard work of trying to perfect himself. And to keep himself honest, he starts a diary, like a logbook of his internal moral battles. He creates this whole set of rules for himself, trying to fight his vices with virtues. He's determined to master his temper, his desires, his habit of hiding from the world. He really believes he can become a better person just by pure force of will. But as his own diary shows, it's a battle he loses a lot. He admits right there to losing his temper, to acting out of pride, to looking down on other people. Turns out the road to self-improvement is not a straight line. It is paved with daily failures. So, and this is really the key takeaway. For Andrei and Pierre, those big turning points didn't actually solve their problems. What happened was they traded one kind of crisis, a crisis of meaninglessness, for a much, much harder struggle, the struggle of actually trying to live up to a new purpose. The real work, the hard work, had just begun. And that kind of leaves us with this final big idea to chew on. Tolstoy gives us these epic battles and huge political moments, but he always brings us back to the quiet internal fights of his characters. And it really makes you ask, with all the chaos of history swirling around, is it possible that the most important battle of all is the one that's fought inside the human soul?